Number 1. If you claim that God doesn't exist, the burden of proof is on you. Now I'm going to start off with a curveball here. I absolutely agree. The difficulty we have here is that we have no context at all for this statement. Is the atheist saying colloquially, God doesn't exist, but meaning, I'm just not convinced God exists? Context matters, and this needs to be established before this conversation can go any further. If the atheist in a casual conversation is stating that they are just not convinced of any of the God claims that they have heard, then there is no burden of proof. All they are stating is, I'm not convinced by that proposition. It is no different to me saying I have £1 in my pocket and someone saying that they are not convinced. You don't have to provide justification for not being convinced about someone's claim. However, it's not always that simple. What if the atheist states, I do not believe X God exists? This is a claim, and contrary to popular belief, you can prove a negative. In logic, there are a couple of ways we can do this. First of all, the modus tollens can prove a negative. For example, if P, then Q, not Q, therefore not P. Then we have the law of contradiction. Nothing can be A and not A. In math, we can prove a negative by multiplying a negative with a negative, and we can also use inductive reasoning, where we would expect to find evidence and it is absent. This method is used in archaeology, where certain evidence is predicted to be found in a certain layer of an excavation and is not present. It's even trickier in a strict epistemological argument, where any claim that is made, regardless of how seemingly ludicrous, is accepted and true until it can be negated. So taking all of that into account, does the atheist have to prove the statement, God does not exist? Well, yes and no. It all depends on whether you are making the claim outright or in response to someone. Let me explain. If the atheist says X God does not exist and is not using it as a shorthand for not being convinced, then they have the burden of proof, using one of the above methods to prove that statement. However, if a theist makes the claim, God exists, the atheist shouldn't respond with, no it doesn't. They should respond with, which God? Which religion? Which denomination? What are the God's specific characteristics and attributes? Only when the specific claim has been detailed can the atheist be expected to demonstrate that that God does not exist. Only when the atheist knows what it is they are responding to can they reasonably be expected to provide evidence to the contrary. And you know what? The conversation rarely, if ever, gets that far, because in trying to present that information, the theist often realises that they don't have sufficient explanation of the God they're positing to begin with. So if you claim that God doesn't exist, is the burden of proof on you? The answer from me is yes, but unless you're having a graduate level epistemological conversation, which you won't unless you're both graduates in epistemology, it's not as scary as it seems. Don't fall into the trap of saying that you can't prove a negative, and don't be afraid to do so. It really isn't as difficult as it may seem. And remember, if you're responding to a claim, that claim needs to be defined before you can reasonably be expected to respond to it.